Hi, everyone. This is Terry Ferris with Asia Impact. I'm looking forward to having a conversation with you again today. I have to go back to the first years of starting as a professional fundraiser. I didn't even know that that was a profession. When I graduated from Pacific Union College, the president of the college, Malcolm Maxwell, sat me down and said, Terry, I've seen the work that you have done over the years with Community Crusade Against Drugs. Have you ever thought about being a fundraiser? And I go, I've never thought about it. Tell me about it. And he went and told me how every university and nonprofit depended on having a group of individuals that each year would raise money for scholarships, for endowments, for capital campaigns. But it really came down to building a relationship with the alumni. And I looked at him and he said, let me introduce you to some of the people there. And so I went over to the development office, as they called it at that time, and had a conversation and found it very fascinating. And I went back to him and I said, you know what? I think that this would be a very rewarding job. So I started my career working in fundraising. Didn't know much about it, had some great mentors that he put in place. One of them was Milton Murray. Milton Murray was a gentleman who'd worked for philanthropic services for institutions for the Seventh-day Adventist Church. He covered the globe. He worked with people, organizations for the church, schools, hospitals, all over. He was very well known with being part of the National Society of Fundraising Executives and taking and professionalizing fundraising in South America. And so I sat down with Malcolm and with Milton Murray. And Milton shared with me his passion, and he looked at me and he said, your name is very, very familiar. And I said, how is that possible? And he goes, you're from Hawaii, correct? I go, yeah. He goes, is your mom Carolyn Ferris? And I said, yeah, my mom's Carolyn Ferris. And he said, oh, I used to work with her like 20 years ago when she first started doing fundraising for Castle Medical Center. And I said, wow, this is amazing. You were my mother's mentor, and now you're my mentor. So I started working at the very bottom. I didn't realize that there's annual giving, major gift giving, capital campaigns, endowment campaigns, legacy advice, legacy giving. I didn't know. So I got started, and on annual giving, we did direct mail letters, and we did what was called a phone-a-thon. We did the grunt work. We just did, back in those days, just constantly writing 4 letters a year, doing the phone-a-thon, writing the magazine on fundraising for the college, and got started. Had no idea. Got my first office, which I thought was quite exciting. I started off, it was June, and they said, look, we're going to be having what's called a phone-a-thon. And a phone-a-thon is where you call the alumni and you ask them for donations. And, you think about back in the early 90s, there were no really computers that we were using. We didn't have phones. We were calling people at home. So they gave me the project. And so I looked at it and I said, okay, look, I have to hire 40 young people from the college to work in evenings to call alumni. Also, I have to get printouts. And, we would spend months in advance going through and printing out these little cards that would have the person's name, their giving history, and everything that they would do. So I ended up, and that was my first major, exposure to professional fundraising. And as I did that, I got to choose the young people that got to work with me. And I ran around campus, I interviewed, and I found that a lot of the students that had worked for me in Hawaii with Community Crusade Against Drugs applied to work with me. So we set them down, we did a training. I looked at, what they had to say, and I said, look, keep it really simple. Let's look at, we're raising money this year for scholarships. We're raising money for general expenses for the university. And, with this, you need to have some basic information. So we trained everyone what to say and when they would call people. We organized all of the cards and everything, and we had it set up in one of the rooms in the cafeteria, and you had 40 people sitting there calling. And I looked and I said, how do I get these young people excited about, getting upgrades? Because if someone had given $40 last year, getting them to get $50. So I went out to the Napa Valley where we were located, and I went to about 30 different restaurants. And I said, hey, we're going to be doing a fundraiser with our alumni. Would you be open to giving a free gift certificate to the young people who are working to recognize efforts that they're doing? And so I collected about 40 of these gift certificates, and I made these charts, and we put little rockets on it. And every time someone got, an upgrade, they moved their little rocket. And it was one way to engage, the callers. And I will tell you that it was a very, very powerful tool. Within the first, 6 to 8 weeks that we run this program, we ended up doubling the amount of money that we had raised before. Now, we had to go back. We had to enter all of that data. We had to study it. We had to make sure that we followed up, because those days we had to send a letter thanking them for their gift and giving it back to us and hoping that they would write a check. And it was a whole year progress, following through with each one of them. And I'll tell you that I learned a lot. Milton Murray would come and visit me, and he would sit down and he would talk with me what I was learning, what would I like to know more about, and where my career would want to go. And he said, you really need to become a member of the National Society of Fundraising Executives. And I said, great. And you go to these events, they're in Boulder, Colorado, they're in Baltimore, different places in the United States, and you'd have 1,000 people there. And I was like looking, going, wow, I did not realize that there were so many people who looked at fundraising as a profession. And if you look at universities, nonprofits, they were ahead of the game. But one thing that I saw was that the Seventh-day Adventists had the philanthropic services for institutions that was so advanced. They were teaching social innovation, how to work in different countries, how to, ask for gifts globally. And that's what I did, is that, a lot of our alumni had come from Asia. And, I learned how to approach them, how to talk to them, have conversations with them. So I spent the first year getting this under my belt. And the one takeaway that I got from Milton Murray was the number one thing, Terry, is one, people don't give because they've never been asked. And I kind of chuckled today because I graduated from Pacific Union College in 1991. And to this day, they haven't called me up and asked me for a gift. Maybe after this video, they will. But it was that takeaway. Then I got to work with Herbert Ford. Herbert Ford was in his 70s, had been around the college, as a professor, teaching, working, and now was running the Alumni Association. And he would sit me down and he would really say, Terry, in fundraising, we're not really trying to beg for gifts. But what we're doing is that we're really listening to what people's dreams are, what their passions are. And we're looking for ways on how we can help them make their dreams come true. He said, you know what? We're going to move you into major gift giving. We're going to have you start going out and meeting people and having one-on-one conversations and talking to them and finding out what their dreams, what their passions. And that's what I started to do. I started to go all over California, went to Oregon, other places, but meeting with alumni, usually 65, 70-year-olds, asking them what was their passion. What were they looking for? And then going back and looking at what scholarships, endowments, and everything that might be of interest for them. I had a great experience. I learned so much. I attended as many workshops and trainings and got to know as many people in the profession as I possibly could. I then decided that it was time to go back to Hawaii, where I grew up. I went to the University of Hawaii Foundation. I applied for a job. I became an associate director of major gifts of the College of Health Sciences. So that was the School of Medicine, School of Nursing, School of Public Health, the Cancer Research Center. And I was the only person. At that time, University of Hawaii was a public university and had never gone into an endowment. And it was very, very, new to the game of really going after big endowments like Stanford, Harvard, and everything. And I got to, at a very young age, I think I was like 28 years old, got the opportunity to help develop the case for support for the health sciences on where we were going to take the medical school, the nursing school, and everything moving forward. I continued to be involved with the National Society of Fundraising Executives. Got to know, was always asking people to learn and teach me more and more about fundraising. And it was there that I started to go out and I started to look at the list of doctors who'd graduated from the John A. Burns School of Medicine, the School of Nursing. I had, as a major gifts officer, 150, 200 names that I had helped cultivate to engage who were alumni. The School of Nursing had just gone through a full renovation, and Dean Harrigan, who was there, was an amazing woman. Dr. Hammer, who was just an amazing person of the medical school, was looking to build a new medical facility in Hawaii. And I got to work with all of these incredible people. What they asked me to do was, like I said, to go out and build relationships. And I said, who are the top 10 people that we had the closest relationship? And so Dean Harrigan said, look, we have this one alumnus who, she was the first woman to ever get her PhD in nursing and had been involved with the school for many, many years. And she goes, can you go and build a relationship with her? I can't remember if she's in her 75 or somewhere around that age. And so I went out and started to visit, meet with her. And what she shared with me was that she goes, my dream is to have a scholarship, an endowed scholarship in my name to support women in the future going into nursing, because I think nursing is extremely important. So I took that information back, met with Dean Harrigan. We went over the strategy. She said, look, let's go talk to the president. So we met with the president of University of Hawaii, and we came up with a plan that, we knew exactly what she was looking for, that she wanted to do something. And we decided to have a dinner at the president's home. Before we did that, we put a proposal together. Spent a lot of time. And you have to remember, we didn't have ChatGPT. We didn't have anything. We were sitting there doing the research, doing our own thing. And I had a couple researchers who were there, who'd worked at University of Hawaii, was looking through newspapers, looking through everything to get as much information that they could to help us. We put together a proposal. We invited the alumnus to a dinner at the president's home at the University of Hawaii. And I remember that night, we had spent months planning this, talking about who's going to say what was going to be shared, who would be doing the ask. And it was very important to make sure that you had all of this in place. That night came, the dean showed up, we met with the president, and then in came the alumnus. We sat down, we chatted for a little bit, we had a wonderful dinner. After the dinner, the president said, hey, I want to thank you for coming to visit my home. Tonight, Dean Harrigan is going to share her vision for the School of Nursing and where it's going. And she did. After she got done telling her vision and where she wanted to see it going, we had prepared for the president to then share the ask. And it was there he looked at the alumnus and she said, "Dear doctor, you've heard the vision and mission. You've heard the work that's going to be doing. I understand the background that you've shared with me and your dream for the future. And tonight we would like to ask you to name an endowment after you, and we would like to ask you to seed it and put $1 million US." Now, for me, that was like the largest ask I'd ever said. And he stopped and he just looked at her. And tears started to come down her eyes. And I thought, oh no, we did something very wrong. And she said, "You know, I've been waiting so many years for you to ask me to make this donation." And she said, "I am very honored to be part of this." What I learned is that we don't look for what we want. We look for what you're looking for. What is your passion? What is your vision? What is your legacy that you want to leave? Many times people are very busy in their working life. And as fundraisers for universities, for nonprofits, for foundations, we have to go and listen to them. We come back and we look at where's our strategy and where we're going. And we look at how it matches. And that night, it had taken us a year to put this together. But that night stood out the most in my early fundraising years, the impact that we were making for individuals, not just for the university, but an impact for those people who wanted to help other people. Thank you so much. This was my professional 101 overview, my first couple years in fundraising. My name is Terry Ferris. This is Asia Impact. I want to appreciate you for your time, and I look forward to talking to you again. Thank you.